Prime Minister Mark Carney's Canada Day deadline to improve interprovincial trade is fast approaching.
We will remove federal barriers to internal trade by July 1st to help unleash the full potential of Canada.
December's fall economic statement predicted that Canada's GDP per capita would increase by nearly $3,000 if internal trade barriers were axed. So for a closer look at where Canada stands in removing these barriers, we're joined this morning by Mark Warner, international trade expert and lawyer. He previously worked on interprovincial trade issues for the Ontario government. Great to have you back on your morning.
Thanks for having me on.
Listen, we spoke with then Internal Trade Minister Anita Anand back in February, who said interprovincial trade barriers could be removed within 30 days. Then in March, Anand told us in an interview on this show that a nationwide credential recognition program is going to become a reality by June the 1st. What steps has Canada taken since then? Where are we at in interprovincial trade barriers?
Well, most of the interprovincial trade barriers are really at the provincial level. I think the commitment at the federal level is to get rid of some of the federal measures that are there. Some of them have to do with licensing requirements in federally regulated professions, so that's relatively low-hanging fruit. The more difficult ones are things like there are a lot of federal regulations that underpin our dairy supply management system, which is really administered at the provincial level, but there are things that are at the federal level. It's not quite clear to me that Mark Carney or the federal Liberals want to deal with that. You know, a lot of requirements at the federal level for going through certain tests of projects that are taking place between provinces. I'm curious to see if they'll get rid of those, because those would be interprovincial barriers. So really, there have, apart from what's at the federal level, there have been a number of agreements between provinces. You know, even if you look at those agreements in detail, there are often exceptions. Ontario is removing exceptions to the Canadian-Canada Free Trade Agreement, but basically not removing the underlying policy. So the most people get is a chance to bring a dispute settlement case. New Brunswick and Newfoundland have an agreement. Newfoundland carves out the fisheries, New Brunswick carves out forestry. So, I mean, it's the kind of stuff we've been dealing with for almost 175 years.
Right, and when you push the federal government on these issues, they will often point back to the province and saying, look, these are issues that they have to deal with. These are barriers that they've put in place that they need to dismantle. Back in April, Ontario signed initial agreements with Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. There was a lot of urgency around getting these deals done, and those deals aim to improve the flow of goods and workers between the provinces, which is important. But how effective are one-on-one agreements like this? Is that the way to go?
Well, you know, ideally we do it nationally. We do have a constitution. If anyone came down from Mars and picked up the Constitution Act of 1867 and read it, they'd say, why are these people arguing about this? It says right there in Section 121 that there can't be barriers between trade between provinces. But that's not how the Privy Council in the United Kingdom interpreted it when it was our basically Supreme Court, and it's been basically upheld since then in that way by our own Supreme Court. So it's tough. The provinces, for obvious reasons, the smaller provinces don't want to cede a lot of ground to the bigger provinces, and the bigger provinces think that's unfair. Even with what's being done, some of the bigger barriers have to do with infrastructure. That's probably where the biggest bang for the buck is, and I'm not sure we'll see a lot of repealing of those measures at provincial level. And I think with alcohol, people love that one. That's the latest case that the Supreme Court looked at and more or less said, we'll let the barrier go through because it's the hit on interprovincial trade is not its primary purpose. So, you know, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, I think there's a lot of energy behind this, but I haven't really seen a willingness yet for provinces or even the feds really to go after the things that really cost us.
So if I'm hearing you correctly then, Michael, what you're saying is there's a lot of talk and a lot of energy around it and some agreements, but nothing yet that, you know, you or I or people who would buy any of these products will experience yet.
I don't really see any, you know, and I think even the federal commitment is a bit unclear. I think it's to introduce legislation by Canada Day in some formulations that we've heard. No, I think that, you know, some of the things that we might the regular consumers might see and benefit from would be removing some of the interprovincial credentialing requirements. But that's not something that's going to give rise to a lot of gains for trade. I mean, the fact that I can go to Alberta and practice law a little more easily is not going to generate, I hate to say it, a lot of gains to the Canadian economy. So it's important. It's an important step to move forward with. I don't want to be too cynical about it, but I do think, we haven't yet seen a willingness to really embrace this in full.
Mark Warner, international trade expert and lawyer, thanks so much for giving us an update, at least on where we're at. Even if it's not maybe the news that we wanted to hear, at least we know where things sit. Thanks so much, Mark.
Sure. You're welcome. Good talking to you.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.